How y'all doing today? It's your boy Jermaine from Shovel Nose Hogs back with another video. And I have a special video today. I have a guest, the one and only Kevin Rhodes. And so I'm going to give it off to him so he can introduce himself as well as how he started not only keeping hognose snakes, but how he became a breeder.
So yeah, my name's Kevin Rhodes. I'm 44 years old. I originate in Lubbock, Texas. That's where I was born and raised. We've got hognose literally in our backyards. I moved to the house I'm in now and caught a little neonate hognose in my front yard about 3 weeks after we moved in. So it's just kind of cool to be right around where stuff is. Had the rare opportunity to be mentored by the father of hognose snakes, and that was Richard Evans. This was before internet age, and he really got things rolling with, he was the founder of the pastel pink gene. He was the founder of the Evans hypo, that's his namesake. And then he was the founder of the orange albino. So lots of really different cool stuff came from him. And I had an opportunity to see firsthand the hognose that came into his pet shop. So people in the area, if they found a hognose in their yard or out on the pasture, they would bring it to him and he would give them 5 or 10 or maybe $20 for an animal. And then he would breed those and see, what kind of genetic potential they had. So he really put a lot of animals into the hobby to really get a good, strong, bloodline going for anybody that had them. And he sold those all over the world. And that was really kind of what got me interested in keeping hognose. I think the first time I saw one was in the wild was when I was 11 years old. My dad took me out and we found one crossing the road and took it home, and it was a problem feeder. And, obviously, situations like that helped me develop magic toad scent and other products because, that's something that we all kind of struggle with. So yeah, the hognose thing is something I've done for, nearly 30 years. And it's just something that is a blast. I just really enjoy.
Okay. And what makes you unique as a hognose breeder is you're also an author and you've published several books on hognose snakes. So kind of talk about some of the books that you have for sale.
Yes, sir. The first hognose book I wrote was in 2010, and that was called Western Hognose, The Complete Guide. And that was back before there was a lot of really good digital publishing. So the quality of that book was not as good. Plus the morphs at that time were really, really limited. There was, maybe a dozen total morphs. Family and friends encouraged me to go ahead and write that. I've always had a, good understanding and appreciation for history. And really wanted to get going with that. And then if you guys know superconda.com, Brent Bumgardner, he was one of the first ones that said, hey, man, you need to be the one writing the book on hognose snakes. So that was my first one in 2010. And then in 2018, through the course of that year, I decided to write the Morph Guide in Natural History. And it focuses on more the genetic, phenotype of the hognose snakes and a little bit about the natural history. Again, for work, and I'm a herpetoculturist, so I go out in the field quite a bit. I'm a herper, and just seeing the things in the wild. A lot of folks don't have the same opportunity, so that really played into that natural history side of that particular title. And then follow up with that to kind of expound on the phenotype. I wrote the trait series, and that came out 2019 and 2020 is when I did the trait series, and that just expounds a little bit on more the phenotypic variation in the hognose morphs. And man, even since those books have come out a year ago, I think there's close to 20 more combos that have been brought to market. So it's just a never-ending cycle, but at least those books give you a good basis on what to look for in the hobby. And as each person comes in and really tries to develop a breeding program, kind of helps them to have a basis of knowledge and understanding. And that was the intent for those.
Okay. Yeah. And I've read all those books. And on my channel, I've actually made videos going into like the different morphs, whether it's sable or the Arctic or the albino, and just kind of showing the morph combinations. And I was kind of inspired by your book because I've only been into hognose snakes for like a year and a half. And when I kind of got interested in them, I was like, I need to have a good understanding of the morphs and see if I combine these two different recessive, what will they look like? And I was having a hard time finding any kind of resources other than like going on Facebook groups or Morph Market. And then I found your book, but there was nothing like that on YouTube. So I was like, maybe I should do this to kind of put this out to a broader audience. But yeah, it's definitely helpful because people have no idea what these combinations look like. And when they actually see them, they're like, man, this is something that I want to create one day. And I think it's just a way to help grow this industry. Because I think hognose snakes one day can be as big as the ball python community. And I feel like we're just in the infancy, because there's not a lot of, especially with recessive morphs, there's not a lot of combinations. You may see two recessive visuals. Now people are starting to make the 3 recessive visuals, but like I said, it's so many things that haven't been done. And definitely getting your books, you actually can see what's already been out there and what you could potentially make.
And I think that, kind of piggybacking that statement too, the books do provide a good foundation, but, for the interested individual, whether hobbyist, breeder, whatever, pull your information from where you can get it. Pull it from, like you said, the Facebook groups, from YouTube, from, other information that exists. The John Berry books, fantastic. It's hard to get a hold of. They're several $100, on eBay if you can even find them. Even John Berry himself doesn't have any extra copies. So any resource you can get on hognose is beneficial. And the beauty of of working with them personally is that you can get great information just working with them yourself. And, it's just been a tremendous deal to be able to see other people's experiences that, I've been doing this for, 26 plus going on 30 years. And, there's been some guys and gals that have been in it for, under a year, and they learn things that, or think of things that maybe I didn't think of. And that's just the beauty of the community.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so what are some of the genes that you're working with, or some of them that you're known for?
So I've brought the Granite Jungle is probably my favorite. And that's one that I brought to market. I guess in 2013 or 14, there's a hognose breeder in the UK named Richard Sawden. And Richard encouraged me to breed out a lot of the wild collected bloodlines. Initially I was bringing them into captivity and just keeping them till the F1 generation, and then selling those F1 generation. But he said, man, if there's recessives that are hidden in there, you need to breed at least to the F2 generation so that you can figure out, what's in there. And that's what I did with the Granite Jungle line. That was from a population that was found within about 45 minutes of my hometown here in Lubbock, Texas. And I had a friend that lived in that area, and he got permits from the state to be able to, resell animals that he found on his ranch. And so we really began to pull from that resource and breed those down. I think I'm down to, with combinations, down to the 11th generation from that population. So really, really getting to explore, what some of the animals have, and, what some of the phenotypes are. And that line, it's very similar. If you've seen in my pattern book, I show how similar the Granite Jungle line is to the spider. The spider gene was brought to market by my business partner, John Lynch, and he lived in the north part of the Texas Panhandle. And those were animals from a wild population up there, almost 20 years ago. And the spider gene is almost obsolete in the hobby. He's got a handful of animals that exist from that line, but there's just not very many. But the Granite Jungle was kind of similar enough that, it gave us some hope and excitement about some of the really cool patterns and combos that those made. They're also similar to the Woma line that Jeff Galewood had. And we're not sure if those are interrelated as far as the Granite Jungle and Woma, but they interact and produce in a very similar manner. But we see that throughout the range. A lot of the studies I've done, there's animals in, Montana with the sable gene, and some of the ones that Dan Ebby has brought to the market. And they react and act and combine with other, projects very similar to what the Woma Lemon Ghost does or what the Granite Jungle does. So that's one of the ones that I brought to market that I'm proud of and breed every year, and they just blow my mind.
Mhm. So I've heard of the granite. So is granite separate from the Granite Jungle?
It is. Now, originally, and I think when the Morph Guide book came out, I had considered that granite was a part, or maybe that the Granite Jungle was two separate traits that had combined, to make a good combination. But I've actually proven since that time that the granite gene is separate from the Granite Jungle. So I know there's some confusion there because I was just trying to determine originally if the odd pattern ones I was calling jungle had granite in them, and it was a combo, but it actually is a single trait gene with dominant elements. So when you outcross those to other bloodlines, you still see select and certain traits that are just very obvious. But the big deal with the two of those is the granite has more of a blocky blotch, kind of like a jaguar might have. But the Granite Jungle's got a lot of blushing and fading, and it's just a really cool animal. They're really neat. They got some vibrant colors when they're young, and then that vibrant color really, really fades out by the time they get to adulthood. So you've got just a completely different looking snake by the time you get to adulthood. So yeah, that's just my baby project that I really, really love, and that I love working with. Some of the other ones that I've got in my collection, I love combos. That's what I go for with combos. So I'll mix, 5-6 different genes, hoping to, just produce some really, really cool combos. If you've ever seen Third Room Reptiles, Joe Schmidt, Joe came up with a lot of morphs way back in the day. He did a lot of combinations and came out with some really cool stuff. And in a similar manner, I think I'm looking into, hoping to produce some 4-gene and 5-gene combos that are distinct enough that you can separate them. I know, like Pistachio Albino, when the two of those got crossed and you had a double visual come out, they're real hard to determine because they're, one trait masks the other. Same thing with Electric Albino, with the Pink Pastel and Albino. Some of those, it's really hard to distinguish because they're so similar. But my hope was just, to have combinations of morphs. I'll give you, for example, I've got some Arctic anacondas right now that are 100% het true hypo, and that are 66% het sable and 50% het pink pastel, 50% het axanthic. So just to give you an idea, there's a menagerie or a variety of genes there, but the sky's kind of the limit with it. The more you mix in, the more opportunities you have for some really cool stuff,
Okay. So kind of piggybacking off of that, in terms of like a beginner level breeder, would you advise them to maybe breed for the actual visuals? Like if they're picking out some recessive animals, would you want them to do visuals or produce hets first and kind of look at like a long-term plan to breed back the hets?
Well, it's exactly, kind of how you brought it up there. It's your goals. If you're looking for something in the short term, which if somebody's coming in brand new, they've never bred hognose before, maybe never bred snakes altogether, then I would suggest coming in with, a pair of hets or a het and a visual and creating whatever, morph they're going for, whether it be sable or pink pastel or, even leucistic, just to get their idea of if they're even going to stick around in the market. Now, if it's somebody that comes from another field that has bred boa constrictors or ball pythons or even leopard geckos, they understand, the combinations that can be created and kind of, they've got a footprint to work within. And in a situation like that, they might come in and go for, buying different hets and seeing if they want to do a long-term project with hets and possets as opposed to, a solidified program with 100% hets and visual recessive.
Okay. Yeah, and then with the possible hets, you can save a little money. So I guess what you have to spend can also be a determining factor as well.
It's just the only issue with the possible hets is the risk is extremely high.
Yeah.
So there's some people that don't, and that I myself, I was okay and willing to go risk because I didn't start with a lot of money. I had when I first got into trying to breed for morphs, I had $1,000 to spend, and that was all my savings. That was it. So some people can afford to come into the market with 20 grand or whatever, and they can kind of go strategic and purchase 100% hets or purchase visuals, and that can work to their favor and to their benefit. You know what I mean, as far as in a short term. But I mean, like myself, I had to go with pos het stuff, and some of the time it worked out well and really proved out. One of the world firsts I brought to market was the albino Super Arctic. I hatched the first one of those that had ever come out, and that was from a pair of Arctic possible het albino. So the possible het albino was just kind of a bonus that could have been on there, and it just so happened that that animal hit. And then the next year, out of a combination involving the male of that, I hatched out the first black ice, which is a Arctic sable. I was the first to bring that to the market, so that was kind of cool. And so yeah, I mean, never forget about possible hets. If an individual's coming in and wanting to buy an animal, find out the lineage on it. And I know sometimes people use that as a marketing ploy, and they'll lie and throw fake hets on top of it. But I think most of the breeders, they want to disclose, at least good breeders that are going to be around for a while, they're going to disclose what genetics are there, and it's just a bonus. You're going to buy that animal anyway. If it's got an extra bonus on top of it that could kind of put the cherry on top, it just makes sense.
Okay. And so in terms of the possible hets, were those two original Arctics, were they 50% het or 66% het?
Those were 50% hets.
Okay, so you really hit the jackpot with those.
Did hit the jackpot with those, and I still have animals. That was in 2014 when I picked those up, but I still have animals from that original bloodline. I mean, we're talking like probably 9 generations in, and they've been crossed with all kinds of stuff. But let me be very clear. That was a $7,000 investment at that time. That was my third investment on them, and that was really it was either make it or break it. This thing's going to do good, and I'm going to do well with it, or I'm going to lose everything. And it's up to the individual to determine where they're at. Obviously you don't want to do that if you're going to lose your house tomorrow, but I had enough to say, man, I hope this thing works. These things don't die. I think all in all, I've probably invested $20,000 in Hognose projects that have never gone anywhere.
Wow.
And so for some people that will, kill your dreams, your passion, that'll leave you dead in the water. And I mean, we're talking about a span of maybe a decade or so, but that's a lot to consider. But consider your options, and think things through. Do a lot of research before you get into something. But you've seen my YouTube video.
Oh yeah.
Go big or go home. Because if you want to make it in this industry, maybe pos hets isn't the direction you want to go. You want to go with something verifiable. You want to go with something that sells. Watch Morph Market and see what animals people are snatching up left and right. And the ones that sit there for 6 months, either the price is wrong or that animal, there's too many of them in the market. So, it takes some due diligence on the part of the aspiring breeder to, kind of figure out which direction to go.
Yeah. And I've watched you have a YouTube channel. You made some good videos on investments. I think it was titled like Hognose Investments, where you kind of go from you made a video like on a beginner and then like intermediate and more advanced, like depending on like how much you want to spend and like with the advanced being like the more expensive morphs. And I think you mentioned that like if you're just starting out, you should have like a 5 year, like set 5 years and give yourself 5 years to see if you really want to stick around in this industry.
And I think that's still viable. I think that's a good plan, because there's so many hiccups. I've got a friend right now, and he's been breeding for 4 years, and this year is the first year that he's had clutches on the ground and will actually be able to produce enough to sell. And for 4 years he's been like, man, I'm gonna throw in the towel right now. I want to get out of it completely. And we all go through that. Every breeder goes through the idea of, is this really worth it? But I think 5 years gives you the opportunity to make a very, very, very informed decision about your keeping skills. It gives you time and buffer zone to hone in on, how to do things better. Because, some people come in and they want to go out and buy a $2,700 Freedom breeder. And I'm not knocking Freedom breeder, but, you can start out, more frugal, if you will, with your spending practices. I've seen a lot of guys go belly up in 9 months because, they didn't know how to tweak those little, extras and kind of hone it in good. But 5 years really gives you a great buffer zone to figure out, is this really what I want to do with, this project, and, kind of go from there. And then, piggybacking on that, on the investment topic, I was offered a pair of Anaconda Hognose back in, this was like 2013 or 14, and they were $1,100 a piece.
Wow.
And they were 50% het albino. And I was like, man, that's a lot of money. But I went ahead and invested it was $2,250 shipped for 2 adults. I think there were 2010 animals. And I offered them to a friend of mine. I was like, hey, you got to do this. And he had about 5 different bloodlines of hogs he was working with, like reds, greens, yellows. He had some just different albino, axanthic, stuff like that. And I said, man, you gotta, I'll sell you one of these animals for $1,000, and you can work them into your projects. You'll make 10 grand over the next decade. He probably made $100,000 realistically at that time, because it was groundbreaking. But he said, nope, I'm going to stick with what I've got. I'm not going to cross Anaconda into anything. And, so the reality was, looking back, hindsight's 2020, but in my estimation, in the Anaconda projects that I crossed into my stuff, I've probably made at least $15,000 from that $1,000 animal, so, but it was a lot of dedication and things with it. Mm-hmm. But where I want to go for the viewer with this information is, you can't buy one project and expect that project to take you everywhere in the hognose market. You have to continually augment your collection with other things and other crosses as you go, to kind of scale up or have combos or diversify. In the financial industry, they say, don't put your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Same thing with hognose. You really have to be diligent about how much you're willing to spend and bring in, and what you're willing to outcross. I mean, there's even, breeders having issues right now with, the lavender gene. If they're inbred too many times, like 4 generations, brother to sister, they start having eyelessness. I had one I got from a guy, and it had no teeth. I mean, no heterodon teeth and no regular teeth. I stuck my pinky in its mouth, or actually it was by accident. I thought, why can't the pinky go down? So he ended up biting my finger and went all the way up with it, and I just slid it out. And I was like, wait a second. And I looked in there, and he had no teeth. Wow. And then I asked the guy about it, and he said, well, I've got one that has no tail tip. And just saying all that to say, if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and you're interbreeding and not outcrossing, it can lead to problems. So diversification is always a beautiful thing. I mean, even if you have 6 hognose snakes, get an axanthic het albino, get an albino het axanthic, get a snow, you know what I mean? Just vary it up a little bit, so that you're not just stuck to one project, if you're really interested in, making money and moving forward as a breeder.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. So what are some projects that you're most excited about this year, or maybe next year, or the year after that?
Are you talking about my personal or just in the Hognose industry?
Your personal.
So my personal, kind of like I mentioned earlier, that True Hypo Arctic project, I'm really stoked about working with that one. Man, you know, we had I talked to you a little bit about one of my animals. I'm going to go ahead and show it right now, if that's okay.
Okay.
Everybody loves to see animals. If you can't see on this one, this is a female raging red. She's kind of gone in hibernation mode because I keep my house that I brought these to, it's really, really cold. So the facility, you know, we keep it around 84 degrees ambient. So she's kind of balled up and acting like she really just doesn't want to have fun and play here. But the Raging Red is produced by one of the guys I do a lot of business with, Scott Lucas, out of North Carolina. He has line bred these guys for about 10 years. And just this year, we found out that this particular trait has a dominant element in it. So I outcrossed this to one of my granite jungle animals, and we produced a Raging Red that's every bit as nice as she was when she was a baby. So that gave us some really, really, you know, a lot of hope and you know, positive energy that, you know, this thing could really be something whenever combos are brought into it. So he's worked breeding that line out for about 10 years. And, you know, we're just stoked about getting, you know, some of this into some other lines, you know, even like Sable or, you know, Caramel or other things like that. So the Raging Red is something that I'm really, really excited about. I invested in that earlier this year before they hit the market. And I'm glad to be working with that line. We're just, I think it's got a tremendous amount of potential. Let me show one of my other ones here if I could. Okay. You had commented on your video about one of my granite jungles I had up for sale. That
was one of the ones that I felt like I missed out on, because I was like, man, I never see pattern, and I'm a pattern guy. I've turned into a pattern guy where, like, I just got a lemon ghost warmer from Jeff, and perfect. That's my favorite snake in the collection.
They're incredible, man. I think they're so underrated, and they've been around a while. But you know, the Woma Lemon Ghost is just. I don't know if you've seen, one of the breeders posted up on one of the Facebook forums today. He had one that went full term in the egg, and it had a stripe from the top of its head to the tip of its tail.
And I don't even think that's Anaconda. I think it was a lemon ghost to lemon ghost and just had a stripe, and it didn't make it.
Yeah, and so you get a lot of unusual stuff like that. So this is a granite jungle. This is a sibling to the one that was for sale last year. So same year. She's a chow hound, and man, I mean, she just goes berserk as far as, I know I got a lot of backlighting coming from this light that I've got, but this gal is just beautiful. Really, really light colored belly with a black stripe right down the middle. But just gorgeous girl. She may be gravid right now, so I'm just kind of being careful about how I handle her or hold her or whatever. Just want everybody to see she doesn't like these tall tubs that I brought them over here in. But yeah, that Granite Jungle project is, you know, just something I'm really excited about. Again, like I said, we crossed those with the Raging Reds. First time female. The eggs weren't as good, so we're looking into some alternative. I haven't done brumation in quite some time, so I'll probably brumate hard, heavy, and cold this year, because that seems to be something that really contributes to you know, the virility or the fertility ratios. So the last animal I want to show, it's something I'm kind of proud of as well. This is something that has been in the hobby for a few years, but you can probably tell this is a mocha. And mocha was also brought to market by my business partner, John Lynch, here from Texas, back in, gosh, he had his first girl probably in 2001, maybe 99, somewhere in there. But they're underrated also. But the problem with the mochas, there's some history with that morph. There was a couple guys promoting those, and They kind of over promoted them, and they were really expensive, and so a lot of people had a bad taste in their mouth for the gene. But aside from that point, I think that they're a phenomenal, especially if you get some of the nice, ones that have been line bred and have those classic big blotches and
those big thick saddles and
white,
kind of like a chocolate color.
Yeah, and they're phenomenal. And I've got Mocha Arctic right now. Then we're excited about seeing how Mocha Super Arctic's going to look. And know Louis Chavez out in Fort Worth, Texas. He's a hognose breeder. He has Cowtown Reptiles. He was the first one that bought the Mocha project from us back in, gosh, I don't know, 2008 or something like that. So he's bred them pretty significantly. You can see his pictures in the books. Some of the ones I call banded or zebra mocha, or he labeled them as that. They're just phenomenal animals. I know they've crossed them into anacondas. I know they've got red version of mocha. So there's some, really cool stuff that the mocha project has got going on. But let me throw out a caveat too. You can find people right now on kingsnake.com and some other places that are selling, quote, mocha anaconda and quote, raging red. And we can't, verify that any of those are from, bloodlines that are, as they were originally intended, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, you see that a lot. But like I say, it's marketing. So you have to be real careful and pick the right breeder to make sure you have the bloodlines, the actual official bloodlines.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, there's been discrepancy before, there were a few breeders, back in the 20 teens that would pick up unusual looking hognose and selling them as jaguars, or selling them as spider, or selling them as whatever. So yeah, I think it's just verifying the accuracy of it and seeing who's been around for a while and kind of knows what they're talking about, because every fly by night company is there to sell roofs to people that have had wind damage, and it's the same thing. A lot of the shows, people come in, they got hognose for sale, they've never been trained, they're problem feeders, they're genetically weak. I mean, it's just it can be a real epidemic. But yeah, you're right, breeder verified is a good thing. But most of the ones on Morph Market, I think, are pretty legit. I don't think I've seen any breeders on there that I would question buying from, for sure.
Okay, so now let's get into, for somebody that's just starting out, and they're interested in getting hognose snakes and they want to get a pair. Let's go through the actual breeding process, since you've been doing this for a long time. Starting out with, from your experience, what is the most appropriate age and size for a female and a male hognose to start breeding?
It's extremely variable. Let me start with just conveyance of what we see in the wild, and then we'll talk about captivity. So in the wild, it is not uncommon to find 100-gram females that have 5 or 6 eggs that are pregnant. So in the hobby, we would say, man, that's tiny. Let's don't go for it. But the difference between the ones in captivity and the ones in the wild that are 100 grams, they're usually 3 years old. So they've got age on them. So everything in the wild is centered around how much food resources available. So like, for instance, here, I'll give you a scenario. A friend of mine called me and they said, we've got little toads and frogs hopping everywhere out here at our house. They said it's like Moses' plague. Every time you step, there's just frogs scattering. So I went out to their little, what we call a playa lake. It's just a lake basin that fills with rainwater, and it's real flat and dry in our area. But I went out there this year and just in turning over, garbage or old tractor tires or whatever, in 1 week, I caught 5 hognose snakes, and I have permits for those. So, I went ahead and collected those and bring those into the, breeding operation, obviously quarantined and whatever. But that's just kind of how we start our genetic bloodlines and whatnot. But each one of those snakes was a different size. But the largest snake I got, she was close to 30 inches and about 300 grams. And so in captivity, you know, if a person feeds a hognose, not even power feeding, in 3 years they could get, you know, a snake up to 300 grams. But in the wild, being that, you know, the rainfall totals and whatever affect how many, you know, the food resource that's available. What I'm trying to say is they don't get as big as fast. But in the hobby, 100 gram females can produce viable eggs. One of the risks that's there is egg binding. So a lot of new breeders are like, I don't know what's going on. I know I've seen your video. You've had that. Yeah. I've had that as well. And it's a scary situation. You know, I had a $2,500 hognose that egg bound on me and ended up rolling, you know, so it sucks sometimes, you know, when you do everything you can do to try to help an animal and there's nothing that can be done. Mm-hmm. So that is one risk with breeding a smaller female. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, I would say optimum is around 150 to 250 grams for a female to breed. Usually if you get anywhere over 300, 350, if they're an obese animal, you can have some complications. Obesity is very counterproductive to breeding. So female hognose tend to have an ability to store fat, not move, and they don't breed as well or have as many eggs. So the way to overcome that issue, I just feed one meal a week to my adult females. So if they're a large female, I'll feed them one hairless mouse adult a week, and that's it. They don't get two a week. They don't get 1-2 times a week. Now, if they're in the breeding age where they're building follicles and they're, you know, getting ready to ramp up for breeding, then I'll increase the food. You know, sometimes depending on how fast they're going, I've got females that their metabolism is so high when they're breeding that they'll eat every single day, you know, like a small adult mouse every day. And they don't put on a whole lot of weight because everything is headed towards the eggs. Yeah. So that's the size for females. Now, males, I've seen males breed as small as 12 grams. Now, I'm not suggesting for you to put your 12-gram male in with a female. I think males that can breed that small, you can damage them. They can injure their hemipene. They can have other complications such as, you know, depending on what type of bedding you use. If a male, you know, is small and he retracts his hemipene and it gets caught on, you know, say some moss or some sandy chips or something like that, he can injure the inside of his organs more so than a larger animal would. So I would say an optimum size for a male would be, you know, 40 to 70 grams. Probably for a male, that would be optimum. Generally speaking, that's going to be a male that's at least a year of age, you know, maybe even 2 or 3. Now, I've seen males that had been in captivity for like 8 or 9 years that were still producing viable semen. I've seen females. My business partner, John Lynch, had a single female that was 23 years old, and that's when her reproductive cycle ended. So she had about 20 eggs every year from the time she was 4 until the time she was 20. And then those last 3 years, it just dwindled down to, you know, 10, 6, 4, and then never again. So, yeah, that's just some things like that. So, yeah, I would kind of, you know, base those sizes to be, you know, optimum for breeding. You don't want to start them too quick, but again, you don't want to, you know, make sure they're in poor health or something like that, if that makes sense.
Okay. So now, once you, let's go into the next one. What about brumation? I know you said that you're about to start back brumating. What do you think is the most appropriate or the best length of time as well as temperature range in terms of brumation?
It's really variable with the hogs. So I think photo period is very, very important. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about. But in addition to photo period, temperatures, just in science, We know that animals that have testes on the outside of their body tend to have better fertility than ones that the testes are close to the body, absorbing the body temperature. So typically cooler temperatures, even for mammals and other animals, are better. I mean, even with guys, they tell you if you're trying to get pregnant, don't be wearing tighty whities around, get something that's going to allow for temperature regulation. Same thing with the hognose. So I've always, you don't have to brumate hognose to get them to breed, but in my experience, we had a really, really hot year this year, especially in May. We had temperatures well over 100 degrees. So that, in the building, even with insulation and things like that, those temperatures still were able to permeate and lift the, temperatures of the building up even 2 degrees. And I had really, really poor fertility this year. But animals that I had acquired from the wild, back in April and May, when I crossed them, their fertility, it was like 21 egg clutches and every single egg was fertile. And we had a really, really cold year here in Texas. We had blizzard back in February here, and it was really, really, really like super cold. So my business partners and I just kind of talked and said, "Hey, man, let's try hibernating our animals at a cooler temperature." So the temperatures for hibernation, typically 50 degrees is a great mark to shoot for. You really don't want to go above 60 because 60 degrees, the snake's metabolism can still be moving. They're active in that enclosure, whatever you've got them in. But 50 degrees seems to be a mark that's really good. Some of the soil temperatures we've taken, I know some of the ones that were taken in Minnesota, the frost line is about, some of the places is 36 to 48 inches in Minnesota because it's so cold there. But they found that some of the temperatures below that mark were, in the 30s. So it's kind of safe to say as long as it's not freezing, you're going to be okay. I know one breeder, Chad Fuchs, he's up in Wisconsin. He's an old-time hognose breeder, but he just puts the snakes in his basement, and it's so cold in their hibernaculum that the water in their water bowl freezes. So not freezes solid, but there's ice in it. So it's, 30, 32, 33 degrees, but he doesn't lose animals, and he has great fertility, with his stuff. I know Dan Eby also is way up in Montana, really, really cold up there. And I think a lot of those places where it gets cold, they have really, really good fertility. So it just seems like heat may be detrimental to fertility. So that's something that we're kind of tweaking on our project. I mean, I've been doing this almost 30 years, and here I am going, hey, maybe we can, look at increasing fertility. So there's always something we can learn. Is what I'm trying to convey with that.
Okay. So once you bring them out of brumation, do you have like a period of time to where you kind of bring their body heat back up? And then when would you start feeding your females and males?
So for brumation in the past, what I've done and what I really liked and saw good progression was that the brumation chamber stays fairly dark. They're going to be underground naturally, so instinctively they know that the light's going to be out. So you'll bring them into a photo period of, 8 to 10 hours when they first come out. And you can, if you have a control on your shop or anything like that, you can tweak that a little bit to where, maybe 1 month the photo period is, it's on, the lights are on an hour longer a day, and then full breeding cycle, it's, 12 to 14 hours, something like that. So that's on photo period. So on temperature, you want to graduate them. So if they're being brumated or hibernated at 50 degrees, you'd like to try to find an area that's 60 degrees and maybe leave them for a day or two, 70 degrees, day or two, before you bring them out. But generally 7 to 10 days of being out, I'll set them up and set the females up in their, oh gosh, what is it? 42 quart tubs is what I use for my girls. And I'll use like one of the large rectangular, like food storage dishes. I have a hole cut in the middle of that, and then it's filled with sphagnum moss as a moist chamber. but that also acts as the nest box. But that's in there all year long. I have that in with all of my adult females. Once they get to 150 grams, they all have a nest chamber in the enclosure with them.
Okay.
So obviously coming out of hibernation, it's not going to be as moist in the smaller container. But once you put them in their container, they can go to where it's moist, kind of hang out a little bit. It's just got damp sphagnum moss or even like cocoa peat, and they'll just hang out in there for a little bit. And then maybe a week or 10 days after they've been in there, I'll reintroduce food. Generally, with the food, I'll go something smaller, like a small adult mouse, maybe even a fuzzy, just to kind of boost that metabolism. Once they poop, I'll graduate back. So right now, I feed my animals anywhere from 1 to 2 times a week. That's just general for everybody. If a female's, ramping up for breeding, then she might get fed quite a bit more often. If she's at the front of the enclosure doing like this at me, when she sees me go by, she's starving to death, and she's got eggs that she needs to, get nutrients for, so she gets fed more often. But that's generally what I do. And then kind of coupling, that topic into introduction, I always introduce the male into the female's enclosure. Mm-hmm. Her enclosure is going to be laden with pheromones. So you also want to watch for shed cycles. Anytime the female sheds after coming out of hibernation, I throw a male in there, okay, if it's not already in there. But they don't have to have that.
Exactly. That's how my female didn't have a pre-ovulation shed. So
yes, and they can store sperm. The longest I've had a female store sperm was, let me think about it. I had 2 of them that one just blew my mind, but one double clutched, and I got like 23 eggs, and she had not been paired with a male in 17 months. So she stored viable sperm. So in their oviducts, I don't have this in any of my more recent books, but my first Hognose book, I talked about the physiological elements of a female hognose snake. And so they have oviducts that the sperm live in, and then there's electrolytes that are there, and that's what the sperm feed on until she's ready to cycle. When she cycles, the hormones release, and those oviducts open up, and the sperm go and do what they do. I think I had another one that was close to 2 years that retained sperm. But animals in the wild, I breed box turtles. Those guys have gone 8 years holding sperm. I saw them copulating, and then they were by themselves forever, and then all of a sudden she lays viable eggs, and I'm going, holy crap! Here I am with 4 fertile eggs from that breeding with that male that I gave away years ago. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So and that throws another wrench into the whole deal too, with the multiple male breedings. So a lot of times you don't see a copulation, but there are clutches that a lot of folks in the industry have had 2 sires for a clutch in the same clutch. So that's kind of interesting. So you kind of got to watch that. One thing I watch for is if I pair some animals, I'm looking for slime trails. So slime trails is just where the dried semen gets on the back. You can use a UV flashlight and see that, or you can look at the sheen of the back. Usually it happens right on the back. So sperm plugs, sometimes you can find those. The males will force those out. That's just the dried semen inside of the area, and it'll get forced out. And that's just something that you might see. A sperm plug usually doesn't mean copulation, but if I can see, a sheen going down, the back of the female, I can usually guarantee that they've had a good lock, maybe, overnight or whatever.
Okay. All right. And so once you have a good lock and your female becomes gravid, about how long does it take from a lock to where you can visibly see that the female is gravid?
So the quickest lock to lay that I've seen is 3 weeks. So like
3 weeks.
20 days, 20 or 21 days. Now that's really, really, really early. The most of them are about 30 to 40 days. So that they'll, but where I'm judging that, those are ones where the female sheds. I throw the male in there. I'll witness a lock or see a good slime trail, and then start counting from that point forward to when she sheds again. Usually after a pre-lay shed is typically 6 to 14 days after that shed. Then they'll actually lay their eggs. So that's pretty standard. But for me here, I don't know if it's altitude related or temperature related, but almost every single snake that I've got that lays, it's 6 days from the time they shed out to the time they lay eggs.
Okay. And so once you have the eggs, what temperature do you incubate your eggs, and what are some of the medium that you use to
So
sit
I
the eggs
just
in?
the food containers. Food containers are really, really cheap. I get those at at a grocer, or you can get them at Walmart or Target or box stores, whatever. But they're like 75 cents. So I actually build racks using those tubs because they're so inexpensive. I can ventilate them and they're good to go. But they make great nest incubation chambers. So I typically use perlite, and I've used perlite that has fertilizer in it with no issues. I've used perlite that's organic, but perlite's a type of mineral that's ground, and it's almost pebble-like, and it's real lightweight, and it absorbs water well. And you can find it at box stores. You can find it at nurseries, places like that. Usually I'll put the perlite in, pour a small amount of water in, and stir it up. And you just want to get it where when you grab the perlite and squeeze it in your fist and open up, it just kind of falls apart. So if you get it too wet, it'll stay wadded, hard, and you can't get it to come apart. If it's too dry, it's like dust and falls apart. But you can kind of play with that, and then that's I put it in a sealed container, no ventilation, anything like that. The reason I do that is there's a species of fly that called a phorid fly, and phorid flies were brought over in the 1960s to combat the invasive red fire ant. So they're actually a species of fly from Brazil, and they get into any and everything, and they love getting into nest boxes. Even here in Texas, we don't have a lot of imported red fire ants, but for some reason the little phorid flies are everywhere, and they look like a gnat, but they'll lay maggots on your eggs. If your snake ever regurgitates in the tank, they're the little flies you see that look like gnats and lay eggs and have maggots, and they're just awful. So I don't ventilate it, but every day I'll come in and open the tub up and let the air circulate, so that they get some oxygen, just kind of verifying that there's no holes. I guess you could do teeny tiny holes maybe with a pin, but those little flies are so tiny they can get into that. And I've lost, very expensive clutches due to those flies before. So kind of unfortunate for sure.
So you don't use an incubator, you use an actual rack at the heat, or do you use just ambient temperature?
See, I just do ambient. So my ambient temperature is usually right at 83 degrees. It's like 82 to 84. And I use, just like a dual heat or cool. And that just keeps the room, at a certain temperature. All of my lighting is on timers, like you would get at Target or whatever, like Christmas tree timers. That just keeps whatever schedule I set. I could come in and flip on the light, but if I'm doing something else or whatever, I know that the light's always going to come on at this time and go off at this time, and I can tweak it when I need to kind of simulate the summer, solstice, being the longer daylight period. Or, if I wanted to cool off the building and hibernate everything in there, I could just, turn on the AC and put the light at, 7 hours a day. And that would simulate that too. So it's just all, simulated, and that seems to work best.
Okay. So what do you think? I know you said you you incubate at 83 degrees. What are some of the temperature ranges that you've experienced in the past and had success with? Or what would you say
I'm
your
sorry.
recommended temperature ranges for
Oh,
incubation?
recommended, I would say 86 max. Somewhere between, and it's going to determine what the length of incubation is. So almost every single one of my clutches hatches at 45 to 49 days, every one of them. Big babies, little babies, it doesn't matter. Every once in a while I'll get a preemie, but that's just very rare. But that's just kind of where I go. I know my friend does his, and he does 81 degrees, and I know his hatch at 55 days. And I know another friend that does like 78 or 79, and his are 65 days. So it's just kind of breeder preference on that. But any clutch that's been 90 degrees consistently for the period of time has had detrimental effects. So heat in incubation that's too high is bad. Now, heat in incubation that spikes towards the end of the time, I've seen that also be detrimental to, a snake's development. So if it's too hot during a certain stage, I've seen where the body will, because when they're in the egg, the chest cavity is open, and the scales are pulled back, the ventral scales. And as they develop and grow, the ventral scales actually connect almost like a zipper straight down the ventral. So whenever the heat comes in too high, when it's over 90 degrees, it speeds the process of the ventral closing. And a lot of times they'll have the stomach or the heart or the lung outside of the ventral of the belly.
Wow.
So yeah, we always are real careful. And that's why when people have heat failure, or like, a dog gets behind the rack and unplugs the thermostat or pulls that out, it not only will hurt your adult animals by providing too much heat, but that same heat, can be detrimental for a clutch as well.
Okay. All right. And so once your babies are start hatching out, one of the most asked questions, or something that most people, you're eventually going to experience this, is, I have a baby hognose that will not eat. So what are some of your strategies that you've used to get a picky eater to start eating? And you can kind of piggyback on one of the products that you actually sell that you mentioned at the beginning of the video.
Well, one of the cool things about hognose in the wild, the eggs are laid anywhere from June to mid-July. So they'll hatch in the wild usually in early September. But a lot of times those babies will remain. We found inadvertently before clutches of hognose snake eggs underground that were still in the clutch. And the little eggshells were dry, and the snakes, it had been months, but they survived in the winter in the clutch. So they survived just based on the nutrition reserves they had. So that's something common, in the wild. So a lot of people, when they're first out, they'll just drop them right down into hibernation and pull them up with the adults in the spring. So that's something viable that can happen, and it won't harm your animal unless they're just teeny tiny and have no nutrient reserve. So a lot of people drop them down into hibernation to kind of stimulate that issue. Some people do it for 3 weeks or a month or 6 weeks and then pull them out. And a lot of times that will jumpstart them to go ahead and feed just that time of simulated hibernation. Generally speaking, my mentor, Richard Evans, he would wait for 3 weeks before he offered any food after a hognose snake hatched. So keeping it pretty consistent, that's just the way that he would offer food. So for myself, I'll take all animals that are hatching, and once they emerge or leave the egg, in the incubation box, I'll pull those animals out and put them in, like, say, an 8-ounce deli cup. And it seems very tight to have those animals all together. Let's just say if it was a clutch of 6 animals, I'll put them all together in an 8-ounce deli that's got some moistened Sandy chips. and I will feed them all or offer food as a group. So I rarely ever have issues with two attacking one food item. I will try each and every one of them. It takes about 40 to 45 minutes to touch the little, the little thawed pinky's nose to their mouth. And a lot of times they just sit there and think about it, and then they'll start to open up, and I'll put it in. And those are always going to be my best feeders. And then the ones that don't, I'll come back 3 days later, try everybody again. But I've had tremendous success in feeding as a clutch in a single dish. Much so, I would say probably 70% better than individuating each of the babies and trying that way. I don't know if it's something to do with, the wild or the way things might happen in the wild, but that's just the way it's worked really well that I've developed over the last 2 years. So if I get animals that feed 3 or 4 times consistently on unscented, I'll go ahead and individuate them into their own, rack tub. And then all the rest of them, keep trying the process. But if it gets 4 weeks down, 4 weeks or 5 weeks down the road, if they start to lose weight or whatever, then I'll use the toad scent method. And to go back before the toad thing, I like to get every thawed pinky and dip its nose in water, and then touch the mouth of the hognose. And I'll tell you why I started doing that. In the wild, when a hognose snake seizes its prey, it doesn't matter what size the snake is, the prey always urinates every time. Doesn't matter if it's a mouse, a frog, a lizard, whatever. Lizards have urates for their urine, but they still have water that they expel when they're attacked by anything, a milk snake, a king snake, a hognose, whatever. So we started picking up on that and taking every one of our little pinkies and dipping its nose in water and then touching the snake's face. And we had immediate results. It was real positive. So if that, physiological touch doesn't get them motivated, then we go over into the, the frog scent. So I'll have, I'll get toads every year that are little small ones and put them in a, little tub of water, and it gets a little bit of the flavor that's on them. And then we'll try that method. And that's just something that is intended to trigger an inert, instinctive, recognition of a food item. So I would say about 95% of them get going on the toad flavor. And then maybe 5% of my problem feeders, I'll have to revert to a similar method with lizard flavor. So that's another product that I sell also. And I developed a way that I can ship it all over the world without having to have customs paperwork or, U.S. Fish and Wildlife forms or whatever like that. It doesn't have any toad parts. It's just got the flavor in it. So that's something that you can use. That's what I use. It's the most consistent. Now, other scentings that you can use are anything that's fish-based. Yeah. And it's probably because the hognose snake, like I was saying earlier, when I was out in the wild catching those at the pond, the little frogs are everywhere. And I've seen hognose snakes before at the edge of a pond eating tiger salamander larvae. They eat like mud turtle eggs. They eat all kinds of stuff. But it seems like whatever they go after has some type of an oil or a flavor to it. So I've had good success with like salmon. Just get salmon from the grocery store, cut a little slice off, rub a pinky's face on it. They might take it that way. Tuna fish has been one that people have had success with. Sardines.
Yeah, I've had a lot of success with sardines.
Sardines are good. Smelt, if you've ever heard of smelt, smelt's a type of fish that's similar to a sardine that's really oily. It works. I've had people say that they fed them boiled egg, like pieces of boiled egg or like egg juice, after they boiled some eggs. What else? Hot dog juice. Lots of different things work. But I stand behind the toad flavor because it's the most consistent. Yeah. I've never had anything that's worked better. And I've lost, $1,000. I lost a $4,000 snake because it would eat nothing. And we had no toads. We were in the middle of a drought at the time. Actually, it was one of the spider hognose, the originals that had a full stripe. I think it's in the Pattern Morphs book. Find the nicest one in there. It wouldn't eat anything, and we lost it. And, you know, we had buyers right then, had a Chinese buyer that offered $4,000 for one of them. And at that time, that was when, you know, other hognose were, I mean, albinos were $150. So for us, it was big money. I'm just saying that, you know, breeders that are working with animals are worth a lot of money. If you're like me, you'll do whatever you have to do to keep that animal alive. You know, at that time, I would have given $150 for magic toad scent if somebody had it, you know. So that issue happening is what led me to develop the product to have so that people can get it. And so it's easy enough. So it's, you know, shippable. And I can ship it to, you know, Germany, or I can ship it to Taiwan, or wherever it needs to go for a nominal fee, you know. And that's just kind of where that product came about. I really started releasing those, I think, in 2018 is when Magic Toad Scent came out, and it's been very popular. People really like it.
Yeah, definitely. And so, where do you see this industry going in like the next 5 years? Because it seems like they're becoming more popular as a pet snake.
Yeah, they're people love the fact that these things are small. You know, I used to breed ball pythons, and I love ball pythons. I love the morphs they possess. But the one thing that I hated about ball pythons is that you had to feed them rats.
Yeah.
And so many times you had to feed them live rats. And I hated messing with live, and I would get bit, or I would have to, you know, find rat breeders, or if they were in short, you know, just a menagerie of, you know, it was just a cluster all the way around, because you just can't, you know, seem to mitigate that issue.
Yeah, and rats are more expensive than mice.
And they're more expensive. Yeah, and they, you know, ball python clutches, your 4 or 5 eggs. You know, if you get 8 eggs in a clutch, it's like a nice prize, you know. But you got a smaller snake that, you know, can double clutch, and people like them. And, you know, you can, I mean, I've got almost 200 snakes hognose myself, you know. And I know people that have, I know one guy that's got 1,000 breeder hognose, you know. And so you've got a smaller animal, it's easier to house. COVID really helped us out. You know, COVID was so detrimental in so many ways, but COVID actually was beneficial to the hobby, the reptile hobby in general, because nobody could spend money on concerts, go to the ballpark, go out and do anything. So they built rack systems, you know, and now they're buying every animal. And man, in 2020, I didn't have snakes to sell. I had people calling me and texting me every single day, and I had no babies of anything. Yeah. And I breed tiger salamanders. I breed box turtles. I breed hognose snakes. I breed bull snakes, king snakes, milk snakes. You know, I didn't have anything. So COVID really expanded our hobby during 2020, and we saw a lot of people coming in. And I mean, you can jump on Morph Market right now, and there might be a dozen female hognose for sale in there right now.
They're gone in a day.
And they're gone. And expensive stuff too, you know. And so our hobby has really, really increased. The prices are super inflated right now, but I still think even with the inflated prices, if you jump in and buy stuff, I mean, for instance, last year I spent $4,500 on just buying stuff from other breeders on Morph Market, you know. And I was buying pairs, and I was buying trios and lone females, because I speculate that this market's still going to continue. Now, I want to give one caveat. We're under an inflated time right now with our economy in the United States and even worldwide. So we are going to see, we're going to see a dip. And every dip that happens economically will affect the hognose hobby. But I still think that even with that dip, and even with the prices kind of following inflation, we're still going to see the hognose snake morphs retain value. I mean, this year, I've had people contact me wanting normal, you know, outcrossed female hognose snakes. and I price those at $325, you know, and they sell like this.
Yeah.
And saying that to say they're a commodity and they're valuable, and people are scaling up their collections right now because they want to breed. And man, you know, 288 morphs or whatever number we're at right now in Hognose, it's not quite that high, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of viability. There's a lot of options. Everybody's got a different flavor they like, and that's what the beautiful thing about this is, that you know, I love patterns, and I'm beginning to love colors more. I'm really looking forward to like reds and greens and yellows and oranges. And you know, the guy down the street, they love sables and pink pastels and galaxy and, you know, you name it. You know what I mean? There's just so much diversification that this hobby is sustaining itself, and people are able to make a living. You know, I do this full time. I don't get money from other avenues. You know, this is what I do to make a living. And it's not a, you know, I'm not rich by any means, but it's livable. You know, I can pay all my bills and have a blast and enjoy myself. So, and I think that's where a lot of people would like to be too, you know, making their own schedule and, you know, being strategic and planning things out and, you know, making some coin. And yeah, I think it's a good deal.
Okay. And so to conclude this interview, if somebody was interested in purchasing one of your books or a hognose snake from you, where can they find you?
So I'm at hognose1.com, and that's the word hognose, the number 1, and then .com. And that's the primary means. And then I'm on Morph Market and on King Snake. And I do vend a few shows. We may be at Daytona this year vending. So there's just some, you know, different places where you can find me. You can see me on Facebook. Sometimes I'm in and out of Facebook because I just get so busy. I don't have enough time to tend to, you know, all the drama that calls my name and, you know, whatever. There's always something going on. Even in the hognose market, as unfortunate as it is, there's always somebody trying to call somebody else out, and, you know, just like any childhood playground. So sometimes I'm off there, but I'm on Instagram too. So a lot of different ways you can find, you know, my business page, but primarily just through the web page is the best way. And, you know, we've got the new books. I was talking to you about the new paperback morph guide. That's something new. It's a little more affordable. And that's going to be autographed copies of that are going to be available soon. They'll direct ship from me. So for a while, I've had everybody go to my printer and buy books. The only drawback to that is they're not autographed. So if people do desire the autograph, you know, and maybe even a less expensive book, there's some options to do, you know, direct from me now. So,
yeah. And you also have a YouTube channel.
I do have a YouTube channel. I haven't updated it in a while, and I probably need to get on there and do a 2021 or 2022, you know, investment strategy deal, kind of piggybacking on this interview. But yeah, I think, you know, there's some good things ahead for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate you for coming on my channel and doing this interview. And I'm going to leave links to your website, your Morph Market page, YouTube channel, everything that's going to be in the description, as well as a link to your printer for your books if anybody's interested in that. And if you like this video, you can definitely subscribe to this channel, leave a comment below. And if you want to follow me on other social media platforms, I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Those links will be in the description. And I'll see y'all for the next video.